very, very good at it, but it doesn't want to do it. And this is not something that one generally uses the military establishment to achieve. It's in defense of the Republic, not against American citizens, and the military establishment is not interested in doing this mission.
Melissa, I want to take that reality from Colonel Jack and play it against Donald Trump's reality. Here's Donald Trump promising the governors that they're going to see a whole lot of the U.S. military in their states.
Got a number of people here that you'll be seeing a lot of. General Milley is here. There's head of Joint Chiefs of Staff, a fighter, a warrior, had a lot of victories, but no losses. He hates to see the way it's being handled in the various states, and I've just put him in charge.
So, Melissa, my question to you, I mean, the military obviously lives by the chain of command. How does the reality of a commander-in-chief who's calling for such an extraordinary and many think inappropriate use of active duty troops on American streets deal with this clash of visions and this clash of what is appropriate and normal and legal?
Well, to be really clear, the idea of federal troops being used for domestic civil enforcement is incredibly extraordinary. The Constitution obviously guarantees that the federal government will provide to the states a Republican form of government and protect them from insurrections and invasions. But it's unclear whether these protests actually rise to that level of extraordinary aid. As a general matter, the states have authority to use their own enforcement mechanisms to maintain order within their borders, and the idea of federal intervention without the imposition or the introduction of the governors really requires a kind of extraordinary step and extraordinary circumstances, and it's not clear that that's the case here.
Jack Jacobs, talk about the
Insurrection Act of 1807.
Who you have watched over the years make their way through West Point. Talk about what they view their role is going to be upon commission and graduation in the world for the military. I'm asking because I heard someone this morning, on top of all the other issues of committing U.S. military on the streets of our country, I heard someone say, this is something like the opposite of a recruitment poster. You are not going to attract young people to the military if they think they're going to end up here face to face with their friends and neighbors back home on the street.
You know, I mentioned earlier that units train for riot control, crowd control all the time, and they do, and they're very good at it. But from the very beginning to the very end of anybody's career in the military, whether it's a couple of years or decades, the focus is always on small unit tactics, training young soldiers, bringing them up through the ranks so that they'll be skilled to complete the missions that the military is normally given. Close with and kill or capture the enemy, defend the Republic against foreign enemies on foreign soil. But rarely, if you talk to anybody, he's not going to tell you, she's not going to, nobody is going to tell you that their focus has been anything at all on using the military instrument of power against its own citizens in any circumstance. You know, we have used the military in other cases, but the perception has been that it is an insurrection, or there's going to be an insurrection. And it's something of an irony because the Posse Comitatus Act and the Enforcement Acts were all for the purpose, were passed by a Democratic Congress in an attempt to get the military establishment out of Reconstruction, they were successful in doing that. It seems like something of an irony to threaten to use the military establishment and all these young people who've been training on small unit tactics against its own citizens. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
So, Professor Murray, another way of looking at this, aren't we one governor's request away from seeing this actually happen?
Well, that would make it a more obvious introduction for the president if there was actually an invitation from the governor of a state for this kind of intervention. But we've actually seen a number of governors say that they don't want this federal intervention. And in fact, federal intervention at this point would likely escalate the tensions that are already simmering in these states, and that they feel they have it under control with their own police forces and the National Guard. And the real question here, if this were ever to be litigated, and I imagine if the president invoked the Insurrection Act, it would be litigated quite quickly, is whether or not a court would intervene here to provide the relief the governors would request.
Two of the perfect voices for this very conversation, and our thanks to Professor Murray, to Colonel Jacobs for joining us this afternoon. During this discussion, we've been monitoring another event, and we have some breaking news. The governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, has announced that the state of Minnesota has filed a human rights complaint against the Minneapolis Police Department in the death of George Floyd. This is one of the legal avenues open to them while we wait to see if the three other officers who were expelled from the force are indeed going to face charges.
They should be charged.
And up next,
now, this was a joke.
and the anger it's caused among religious leaders across our country.
He used the Secret Service, the police, all of everybody that was at his command to fire tear gas and rubber bullets at a peaceful protest, just so he could take a photo op at a church holding a Bible. He didn't read any scripture. He didn't even open the Bible. To me, I think that this is the downfall of Donald Trump, and he will lose in 2020. It's my opinion. And everybody can have one. But there you go. This is Lightning Dave. I'm out of here.
You get free 2-day shipping.